My parents told me there wouldn't be space for me at the annual family retreat. Not enough room, they said. 2 weeks later, I watched 67 names appear on the guest list. My 4 siblings, their spouses, their kids, even cousins I barely remembered. Everyone had a place. Everyone but me. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I stayed silent. 9 hours later, my mother's voice cut through the cabin like a blade, sharp and loud enough to stop everyone in their tracks. My name is Alan, and this is the story of how being erased by my own family forced me to take back my voice. When I look back, I can still smell the pine of the Johnson cabin in Montana, the way the wood creaked under our feet, the way the nights glowed because I strung up dollar store lights like they were chandeliers. I was the one who turned those gatherings into something worth remembering. I picked the playlists. I grilled the food. I filmed the highlight reels. I turned a cold cabin into a celebration. Everyone used to laugh and say I was the heartbeat of our traditions. And when the family upgraded to Clearwater Lodge in Lake Placid with glass walls and lakeside views, I carried that same spirit. I planned, booked, organized, filmed, edited. The Miller family highlight reels, those were mine. But then came the collapse. The startup I had poured myself into in Chicago went under, and the life I had built in the city evaporated. Then came Natalie's betrayal. 3 years with someone else while still wearing my ring. Divorce papers signed. I moved from a modern condo in downtown Chicago to a shoebox apartment in Cleveland. My family's sympathy lasted about a week before it morphed into a smirk. To them, I wasn't just hurting. I was failing. My siblings thrived. Ryan, the golden child, built real estate towers in Dallas. Taylor wrote exposés and posed with her twins for glossy spreads. Jason signed with a record label while his wife dressed him like a model. And Lena? She waved protest signs while her kids racked up science fair trophies. And me? I became the cautionary tale. Mom curated it perfectly on Instagram. Family first, she captioned, with all of them in designer coats against the snowy lake. My face was absent. Instead, Natalie's smile beamed back at me through the screen. My ex-wife, still welcomed, still praised as graceful and perfect. Mom made sure everyone saw that, even tagging Natalie in photos I wasn't invited to take. The memory that won't leave me is Thanksgiving last year. I sat at the end of the table, wedged between sticky-fingered children, handed a $25 gift card while my siblings unwrapped engraved watches, spa packages, and custom art. I laughed it off like it was nothing, but inside I felt like someone had carved me hollow. I told myself I still belong. I told myself I was being sensitive. But that night, walking back to my apartment with the cold air cutting my face, I whispered a question I couldn't silence. Maybe I really was the problem. Because my family adored Natalie. They still celebrated her presence while quietly erasing mine. And if they loved the woman who betrayed me more than they could stand to look at me, what did that make me in their eyes? It was a Tuesday night when the phone rang. Mom's voice carried that familiar sweetness laced with control. Alan, about the retreat this year, we had to make some tough decisions. There just isn't enough room for you. I pressed the phone tighter. Not enough room? The place sleeps dozens. Well, she sighed. We prioritized couples, the kids, and some extended family. You understand. I can sleep on the couch. I can rent a room nearby. Her tone sharpened. It's not about logistics. It's your energy. We can't have your negativity affecting the atmosphere. The word scorched. Negativity. As if heartbreak was contagious, as if I was a disease. As if heartbreak and job loss were contagious. As if I was a virus to quarantine. I tried reaching out to the others. Dad brushed me off. We have to keep numbers reasonable, you know that. Ryan shrugged. I don't make the list, Taylor said. I'm too busy with the kids to get involved. Jason added. They have their reasons. Don't blow it up. And Lena whispered, I don't want to fight with Mom. That's when the first crack widened. When Lena accidentally forwarded me the cabin list, My stomach dropped before my eyes even finished scanning it. Cabin 6, Taylor, her twins, and Natalie. My ex-wife wasn't just invited. She was given a bed. The second cut came fast. Ryan's wife, Harper, posted a boomerang of suitcases lined up in a row. Epic Miller family reunion, the caption said. Hashtags filled the screen. Hashtag family vibes, hashtag just together again. I clicked the group chat link. It didn't exist for me. They built a new one, without me. Alone in my apartment, my phone buzzing with a world I was locked out of, I stared at the ceiling. 67 people. Siblings, in-laws, cousins, even friends. Everyone had a place. Everyone except me. And to outsiders, the story was spun smoothly. Alan's busy in Denver for work. A lie polished enough to erase me without anyone questioning why. The weight of it pressed down until I couldn't breathe. Invisible. Unwanted. Exiled from my own blood. Vesper never knocked. She just burst in with pizza and beer like she was rescuing me from drowning. She pushed open my door with a pizza box balanced on her forearm and a six-pack dangling from her hand. Surprise rescue mission, she announced. I tried to smile, but she studied me like a triage nurse. Eat first. Talk after, she said, sliding a slice onto a plate and handing it to me like medicine. I told her everything, Mom's careful phrasing about my energy. The group chat I wasn't in, the way the phrase not enough lodged in my throat. Vesper's jaw tightened. This isn't about space. It's punishment. You didn't play the part they wrote for you. You left a marriage that made them look good. Her voice was sharp, but her eyes softened. Stop begging for a seat at their table. Build your own. I laughed bitterly. Build my own family? Yes, she said. You've always been the architect of vibe. So, Architect 1. She clinked her beer against mine. And don't worry, you won't do it alone. The next afternoon, I sat in Dr. Sage's office, sunlight pooling across the rug. She asked, How long have you been the event planner for your family? Since the beginning, I said. It was my way to matter. And when you stopped performing, they stopped clapping, she replied. The words stung because they were true. They value achievement over authenticity, she added. When you organized joy, they applauded. But when you showed grief, failure, or anger, you didn't fit the picture. The consequence? Exclusion, disguised as logistics. Something shifted in me. My family wasn't protecting tradition. They were protecting their brand. I drove home in silence. By the time I reached my apartment, anger had replaced despair. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that lights a path. By morning, I had a plan. I texted 3 names, Vesper, Milo, and Sierra. Come over. Need to talk. That night, they crowded into my tiny apartment, bringing chips, wine, and the kind of presents you don't have to earn. I told them everything. I want to host my own retreat. Not revenge, just a place where I belong by design. Milo leaned back, grinning. I know vendors within 100 miles. Sierra lifted her camera. If it happens, I'm filming it. Vesper raised her glass. Correction, it will happen. And I'll help you run it. The 4 of us laughed then, loud, unpolished, genuine. For the first time in weeks, the weight in my chest loosened. The house almost felt like fate. Scrolling Instagram, I saw my mom's post tagging the resort. Nearby, a rental agency had geotagged another property, Silver Pines Estate. 9 bedrooms, an infinity pool that spilled into the horizon, a private dock stretching into the water. Newly available due to a cancellation. When I called, the manager offered me a 40% discount if I booked immediately. I signed the contract before she finished her sentence. We caravanned up the mountain behind sunset. Silver Pines glowed like a lantern. Inside, the floors smelled faintly of lemon oil, and the windows framed the lake like a painting. Milo dropped his bags and whistled. Alan, this place is ridiculous. Sierra spun in a circle, camera already in hand. Vesper plopped on the couch and said, So, what's the playlist? We laughed until my ribs hurt. Night 1 was simple: burgers on the grill, Milo's favorite red wine, and my playlist humming through the speakers. We sat close, the air cold enough to keep us huddled, the fire spitting sparks. At one point, Sierra caught me watching them and said, "Don't you dare get sentimental, I'm recording this." But I was sentimental. Because here, surrounded by friends who chose me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: safe. The next morning, we slid kayaks into the water. My arms burned as we paddled toward the cove. When we rounded the pier, I saw them, my family. On the resort's private beach, they looked like a staged photo: Ryan lounging in a chair, Taylor chasing her twins, Dad in his oversized sun hat, Mom talking with her hands. For a second, instinct told me to turn back. But instead, I raised my paddle and waved. Ryan squinted, then stood. Taylor shaded her eyes. Mom froze mid-gesture. None of them waved back. I didn't stop. The kayak sliced forward, the wake stitching itself closed behind me. Later that day, we went into town for dinner at Harbor and Vine, a cozy place with string lights and wooden tables. The hostess had just seated us when a familiar voice called my name. "Aren't you supposed to be in Denver?" I turned. Aunt Nora stood at the host stand, Mom and Taylor flanking her. Sierra's camera sat on the table, still recording. Vesper raised an eyebrow, waiting for my response. I smiled easily. "Change of plans? I'm at Silver Pines for the week." Silence rearranged itself around us. Taylor's eyes flicked from my friends to the camera to the hostess, who shifted awkwardly. Mom's face went still, like if she didn't move, the truth might disappear. "Well," Aunt Nora said brightly, "isn't that wonderful? Family everywhere." We all stood there, the lake shimmering through the window behind us. I didn't mention the phone call. I didn't ask why my ex-wife had a bed. I didn't demand anything. I just let the facts exist. As they passed, Mom brushed my elbow, not with affection, but with a silent plea: "Don't ruin the picture." Back at the house, though, I didn't feel ruined. I felt free. Because for the first time, I had a picture of my own, and it wasn't missing anyone who mattered. By the third morning, Silver Pines felt less like a rented house and more like a pulse. Milo set up a portable hoop at the end of the gravel drive, Vesper commandeered the kitchen with a clipboard and a timer like she was running a show, and Sierra floated from room to room catching tiny human things. The moment someone leaned on a shoulder, the split second before a laugh breaks, the way a hand finds another hand without thinking. The first knock came from the dock, 3 rapid taps, a pause, then 2 more. When I got there, Ryan's kids, Max, Ava, and little Jude, were standing in their puffy jackets with hopeful eyes. "Mom said we could say hi if we wore life vests," Max declared, already stepping onto the planks like he'd been invited. I looked past them to the resort beach. Harper waved a cautious wave from far away. Ryan stood beside her with his hands in his pockets, not waving, but not pulling the kids back either. "Life vests are mandatory," I said, and the kids cheered as if they'd won a prize. 10 minutes later, they were zipping across the cove on a jet ski behind Milo, hooped on by an enthusiastic hype squad of Sierra and Vesper. Taylor's twins appeared next. "Can we make pizzas?" one asked, as if our wood-fired oven had personally texted them an invitation. They stood at the counter dusted in flour, while Vesper taught them to stretch dough gently with their fingertips. "You're a natural," she told them, and they glowed under the compliment like sunflowers tilting toward light. News travels through families the way wind travels through pines, quietly at first, then all at once. By late afternoon, an uncle strolled up, just to borrow ice. An aunt dropped by, with a tray of deviled eggs. A cousin I hadn't seen in 5 years found herself inexplicably drawn to the smell of dough and smoke. No one announced they were leaving the resort. They simply arrived here, bearing contributions and curiosities, as if their feet knew something before their mouths did. I caught sight of my mother once across the water, posture like glass. She wasn't coming. I told myself that was fine. At sunset, we ate at the long tables we dragged toward the shore. The string lights winked on as if they'd been waiting for the cue. Milo insisted on a toast. To the host, he said, standing on a bench for height. To the architect. Sit down, I groaned, laughing. But he kept going. To the man who knows that family is a verb. To making a space where we're all allowed to arrive as we are. Sierra tapped her glass, and Vesper added. To chosen and given families, the ones we build, the ones we mend, and the ones we release. Glasses lifted all around. The kids clinked juice boxes with ferocity. When we sat, Vesper slid a plate in front of me, a slice of pizza crowned with basil like a small green flag. This is yours, she said. Claim it. We played horse until the string lights threw our shadows across the gravel. The twins invented new letters, horse became horizon, and the adults pretended not to be winded. Later, we crowded around the fireplace, and Sierra coaxed a song from Jason's old guitar, the one that had been living in my trunk since college. By the second chorus, everyone knew the words. I realized I was smiling with my whole face. 9 hours after the first kids arrived, 9 hours after I had decided not to run from the sight of my family, I heard my name from the path that cut between pines. Not loud. A controlled volume that tried to masquerade as calm. Alan. My mother stood at the edge of the lights, flanked by Taylor and 2 cousins who shifted on their feet like they'd been drafted as moral support. Dad hovered a few paces back. His expression carried the weight of someone who has just realized the meeting invite was sent with the wrong agenda line. Can we talk? Mom asked. It wasn't really a question. Vesper caught my eye. I nodded that I had it. She squeezed my wrist as I passed. It was a squeeze that said, come back to the fire when you're done. We stepped away from the warmth until the night felt like a different room. This is calculated, Mom said. You're pulling people from the resort. You're trying to split the family. I made space for people who wanted to be here, I said, keeping my voice even. That's not a split. That's an option. She stared beyond me at the lights and the long table and the silhouettes of cousins refilling plates. You always do this, she said. You make everything about you. I let the words sit so I could feel whether they were meant for me or for the feeling she couldn't name. You told me there wasn't space, I said. But there was space for Natalie. At the name, something flickered. Taylor flinched. One cousin suddenly found his shoes intensely interesting. Natalie fits in, Mom said, the words clipped. She doesn't make things difficult. She lied to me for 3 years, I replied. You rewarded the appearance of agreeable over the reality of integrity. I wasn't angry. I was just done negotiating with smoke. Taylor cleared her throat. Mom, she said, voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. We heard Natalie by the fire 2 nights ago. She called Alan dead weight. In front of the cousins. Taylor looked at me, and didn't look away. I should have said something sooner. Mom's mouth parted. She said that? And worse, Taylor answered, a small tremor in her throat. I'm sorry. Silence hung between us like fog. Dad stepped forward, hands at his sides. We mishandled this, he said, the sentence heavy as concrete. I mishandled this. Mom's breath hitched. For a second she looked like someone who just discovered the ocean at night, vast, black, honest. She tried to recover. You're still making a spectacle. I gestured back toward the table. We're eating pizza, Mom. We're playing horse. The only spectacle is that people are laughing like they mean it. Her hard veneer cracked. It wasn't dramatic. It was a small fissure barely visible unless you were close. I didn't know how to love you, she said to the dark air, almost to herself. Not the way you needed. I only knew how to present us. She looked at me then, as if asking permission to be softer. I didn't give her absolution, but I gave her room. There's a chair for you if you want one, I said. No script required. She didn't take it, not right then. She turned and walked away, shoulders trembling like a fence in wind. Taylor mouthed thank you and followed her. Dad lingered. Son, he said. He hadn't called me that in years. Come back to the fire when you're ready. I did. Vesper passed me a mug of something warm. You okay? I think so, I said. For the first time in a long time. Sierra lowered her camera. I didn't film that, she said. That was yours. We settled into a kind of gentle noise. Jason played another song. Max fell asleep under the tablecloth like a small ghost. The twins argued about whether marshmallows should be singed or molten. Harper thanked Vesper for the dough lesson. Ryan hovered, then sat across from me with a look I recognized as admission. I stayed quiet because it was easy, he said. I'm sorry, Al. Okay, I said. I let the apology land. It didn't solve an entire history, but it was a brick I could place in a new wall. The next day, the path between the resort and Silver Pines was a two-way river. People went back and forth with covered dishes and borrowed board games and stories that didn't require a public relations strategy. By dusk, Dad wandered in carrying a cooler like a peace offering. Trout, he announced, almost sheepish. I haven't grilled it right in years. Milo surrendered the tongs with ceremony. Dad grilled and didn't micromanage anyone. That was our miracle. We ate at the long tables again, that same gentle generosity moving from plate to plate. At some point, Taylor stood, cleared her throat, and read something short she'd written on her phone. She called it a note to the middle. The middle where most families actually live, she said. Between perfect and broken. When she finished, we all clapped. Not because it was perfect, because it was true. Near midnight, I found Mom at the edge of the deck, watching her reflection in the black lake. She didn't flinch when I stood beside her. For a minute we just listened to the water. You were always different, she said finally. I tried to round your corners so you'd fit. I see now that was about me. Not you. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But it was a fact placed gently on the table between us. There's a chair for you tomorrow, I repeated. The big breakfast. No photos necessary. She nodded once. I'll try. That was the first honest promise she'd given me since I learned to tie shoes. Breakfast the next morning felt like a tiny festival. Pancakes stacked into geography, bacon that disappeared in minutes, blueberries rolling like marbles across the butcher block. The kids set out place cards, each one with a doodle. Mine had a tiny string of lights drawn across the top. When Mom sat, quietly, carefully, without fuss, Harper mouthed holy wow across the table. Mom didn't give a speech. She asked Max about soccer. She complimented Vesper's coffee. She told Sierra her photos made people look like themselves. I didn't need her to announce contrition. I needed her to show up with fewer masks. She did. On the last night, we pushed the tables together until they formed one improbable line from the deck to the start of sand. Everyone brought something, a dish, a joke, a story, a song. Sierra set a camera on a tripod but didn't direct anyone. She let the evening be what it wanted to be. When the stars found their places, Milo banged a spoon on a mug. One last toast, he said. From the architect. I stood and felt a calm I didn't recognize in myself. Thank you for coming, I said, voice steady. Thank you for choosing this table. No one was forced to be here. That's what makes it mean something. I looked down the line, friends, cousins, siblings, children who knew none of the politics, only the promise of Esmores. I learned this week that love isn't the same as approval. And that family isn't the same as an audience. I'm building my life so it works without applause. You're welcome at my table. I'll be okay if you're not. I sat. People didn't cheer. They breathed. It was better than cheering. Sierra's edit from the week went live a month later, 39 seconds of what joy looks like when no one performs it. A hand steadying a wrist as it pours coffee. A kid missing a shot and getting a high five anyway. A father teaching his son to salt a grill. A mother listening instead of arranging. It spread faster than anyone expected, not because it glittered, but because it felt like a real porch light in a world of neon. Sierra's edit from the week went live a month later. It spread faster than anyone expected. The first call wasn't from a company, but a woman who wanted to host a reunion for her estranged sisters. "I want what you have," she said. That feeling. That's when we opened a Google Doc, named it Northlight, and began building something new. On our first paid weekend, a CFO squeezed my shoulder after the closing breakfast and said, "This is the first time my team has felt like a team in 2 years." I pretended I had something in my eye. At Thanksgiving, there was a real chair for me. Not because of PR pressure or optics. Because the kids demanded Uncle Alan sit where the maple syrup could be reached, and no one argued with the kids. Mom made her pie without photographing it. Dad asked me how to get a playlist to fade between songs the way you do it. Taylor passed me her twin science zine and asked if Northlight would host a family day next summer. I didn't need any of it to feel whole. But I let it be good. On a cold evening in late December, I walked down to the water with Vesper and Sierra and Milo, my first circle, my proof of concept. Our breath lifted into the air. The lake lay flat as if saving our reflections for later. "Look at you," Vesper said softly. "You built a room and filled it." "Not alone," I said. "Exactly," she replied. We stood there a long time in a silence that felt like support, not absence. Then we headed back to the house where the lights were warm, the door was open, and there was always one more chair. I used to think freedom meant being invited back. Now I know freedom is building my own table, and meaning it when I say, "You're welcome here." And if some people never come, we keep the porch light on anyway.